Geneva, October 18, 2020. For under the glare of spotlights and the hum of polite conversation, world leaders gathered for another summit, promising unity and recovery. The hall was filled with calm, classical music, yet beneath the surface lay a restless tension. Delegates in expensive suits exchanged practiced smiles, weary of conflicts that lingered too long, hunger, inequality, the unfulfilled promises of aid. Barack Obama strode onto the stage with his trademark poise, and cameras pivoted toward him. He would speak soon. But murmurs rippled through the back rows when Ibrahim Traoré, president of Burkina Faso, entered quietly in his olive military. Uniform, no medals, no gold trim, only an unshakable sincerity. Some diplomats raised eyebrows. What could a leader from one of Africa's poorest nations possibly teach them? He took a seat without fanfare, hands folded, gaze steady. An hour later, those same skeptics would sit in stunned silence, and one man, Barack Obama, would wipe tears from his eyes. It began during the coffee break. A Nigerian delegate rose, voice unsteady. "May Captain Traoré speak?" Protocol bristled, but Obama nodded. A ripple of reluctant applause followed. Traoré walked to the podium, clutching nothing but conviction. "I do not come to recite policies," he began softly. "I come to speak of pain and of the promise that pain demands." He looked directly at Obama, then at the cameras. "In the past year, I have seen boys scavenging trash for food. I have met girls forced into marriage at 30 not in war zones, but in forgotten villages." The translators froze. There was no precedent for speaking so plainly. Continued, voice unwavering. "You talk of rebuilding economies. What do you say to a mother whose child dies, not from war or disease, but from a billion-dollar aid project that never left the boardroom?" A single breath echoed. In that hush, he confessed his own poverty. "I was born in a home without electricity. My father died carrying bricks for men who never learned his name." Even Obama leaned forward as Traoré whispered, "But from those ashes, the forgotten can rise." Then he quoted the former president, "We are the change we seek." Traoré's eyes burned with urgency. But change doesn't come from Washington or Paris. It comes when the world stops seeing Africa as a patient and starts listening to her as a prophet. Traoré's voice softened further. "I had a brother, Khalifa. We played with old tires, chased goats, dreaming only of rice and Sunday meat. At 10, he walked 5 miles for bread and never returned. Poverty doesn't just steal food, steals dignity and teaches children to fight rather than to live." He swallowed hard. A translator's shoulders shook with silent tears. He looked around the room. "Okay, my country is not a statistic, nor is it your project. We are people with names, graves, and memories. My brother died for bread. I stand here to feed another hunger, a hunger for justice." Hundreds of eyes, including Obama's, glistened. The hall grew heavy with realization. Phones hung forgotten. Over notepads, journalists ceased tweeting. Finally, Obama rose. The room held its breath. Placing both hands on the podium, he spoke simply. "Ibrahim, didn't know? You have reminded us of what we've overlooked. To every African child listening, we hear you, we see you." Applause rippled through the audience, tentative at first, then firm. Traoré offered a small, respectful nod. It was neither victory nor concession, but acknowledgement, a moment when truth transcended politics. Later, delegates whispered that they had never felt so moved at a summit. And in Geneva that night, leaders returned to their hotels carrying more than speeches. They carried stories that would shape policy, if only they found the courage to listen. Geneva, October 18, 2020. For under the glow of chandeliers and the hum of polite chatter, global leaders gathered for another summit, promising unity and renewal. Delegates in tailored suits exchanged courteous nods, accustomed to the ritual of rehearsed speeches and polished handshakes. Barack Obama took the stage first, his presence commanding respect. But all eyes quietly shifted when Ibrahim Traoré, president of Burkina Faso, entered in his simple olive uniform, no medals, no fanfare, just a steady gaze. An hour later, Traoré would leave the hall transformed, and so would the world. It began during the mid-morning break. A Nigerian diplomat rose and asked Trembling, "May Captain Traoré speak." Protocol crackled with disapproval, but Obama nodded. The room stilled as Traoré approached the podium. No notes. No teleprompter, only conviction. "I do not come to recite policies," he began. "I come to speak of pain and of the promise born from it." He looked at Obama, then scanned the silent audience. "The past year I've seen boys rummage through refuse for scraps. I've met girls forced into marriage at 39, in a war zone, but in villages forgotten by aid." The translators paused. The hall fell utterly quiet. "You speak of rebuilding economies," Traoré continued, "but what do you say to a mother whose child dies not of war or disease, but because a billion-dollar project never left the boardroom?" Single breath hung in the air. He confessed his own childhood. "I grew up without electricity. My father died carrying bricks for men who never knew his name." His voice cracked as he whispered, "Yet here I stand, because the forgotten can rise." "For years," he said, "we've been seen as patients, not prophets. But Africa speaks if you listen." Traoré paused, drawing a visible tremor. "My brother Khalifa died at 10, fetching bread. Poverty steals dignity and teaches children to fight rather than to live." Translator's shoulders shook with tears. He looked squarely at Obama. "You once said, 'We are the change we seek.' Change does not come from Washington or Paris, but when the world stops pitying Africa and starts learning from our prophets." At that moment, Obama closed his eyes, his composure cracking. A lone tear traced down his cheek as the weight of those words settled. Traoré raised his hand in a gentle benediction. "Do you believe we have done enough?" he asked. The room held its breath. Then, without applause, without fanfare, Traoré quietly stepped down, his message delivered, his challenge made. Headline speeches and photos would follow, but the summit had already shifted. In the weeks that followed, supporters built a roof for the school in Burkina Faso. Medical volunteers rallied donations. Even an 11-year-old in Tokyo sent his shoes for children half a world away. And behind closed doors that night, two men, one from Chicago, one from Doré, began to plan a partnership born not of politics, but of shared humanity. The world was listening at last. The hall was hushed when the letter arrived. A trembling volunteer handed Captain Traoré a small hand-addressed envelope. He unfolded it carefully. Inside, in Fatu's young script, were these words: "Dear Uncle Ibrahim, I saw you on my uncle's phone. When you read my words, I screamed in. So did my entire village. You made me believe I can be president someday. If I'm president, I will fix all our broken chairs and give every girl her own shoes." Beside her signature, she had drawn them both as stick figures, Traoré standing beside a smiling girl. Books piled at her feet. As he read it aloud, his voice cracked. For the first time in public, even the translators paused. Barack Obama, seated in the front row, pressed a hand to his heart. Later, unseen footage from 6 months earlier surfaced. Traoré, without security or cameras, kneeling on the dusty floor of a northern Burkina Faso clinic, bandaging a child's leg by flashlight. No medals, no ceremony, just him, comforting a frightened boy. The video went viral overnight. Medicine's Sans Frontiers declared it the most authentic act of leadership we've ever witnessed. Obama tweeted, "This is leadership, not show, not talk, just love." When asked why he hadn't publicized the visit himself, Traoré answered quietly, "That child didn't need a president. He needed a father." On the summit's final day, a UN delegate burst onto the stage with urgent news. An earthquake had struck eastern Burkina Faso, collapsing schools and clinics, trapping children under the rubble. Without hesitation, Traoré stood. "My summit is where my people lie beneath dust," he said, and walked out, leaving protocols and cameras. Behind, Obama rose first in a standing ovation, and one by one the assembled leaders joined him. That evening, satellite images showed Traoré on the quake site, digging with his bare hands alongside villagers. CNN dubbed it the most selfless act of modern statesmanship. Amid the rubble, rescuers pulled a 6-year-old boy from beneath. The debris, shaking, he clutched Traoré's uniform. Without fanfare, Traoré whispered, "You are safe now." The boy asked, "Are you my father?" Traoré knelt, tears in his eyes, and said, "Today, I am." Back in Geneva, the summit technically ended, but Obama invited one last unscheduled moment. Stepping forward, he addressed Traoré. "You reminded us that true power isn't in speaking over people, it's in kneeling beside them. A leader's worth is not in applause, but in tears." One by one, every world leader lined up to embrace the man from Burkina Faso. No words were spoken, no cameras needed. Back home, villagers held candles and sang in the night, waiting for his return. When Traoré walked back into his village, he said simply, "I didn't go to Geneva to speak. I went to remind the world that the forgotten still feel, still bleed, still dream. If I do one thing worth remembering, let it be that I never left my people when they needed me most." That evening, the summit rebroadcast in 63 languages,